Sometimes in our lives, events happen that cannot be explained by logic. Random encounters on the street, non-existent locations, and a voice from nowhere. All of this makes us doubt what we know about the world. This video presents stories of people who have encountered something inexplicable. Enjoy the viewing. I was returning home quite late. It had been a difficult day. I was held up at work. Then I waited for the bus for a long time. Finally, getting off at my stop, I walked down the familiar street. There were almost no people. The street was empty. As I approached my building entrance, I saw someone coming out of it. There were only a couple of meters between us. I took a step, glanced at the guy, and my hair stood on end. This person was me. He wasn't just similar to me, he was my exact copy. His face was a spitting image of mine, my body shape, everything was a perfect match. The only difference was the clothes. He wasn't wearing what I was at that moment, but something that I actually have at home. My heart started pounding wildly. I didn't even say anything. Not understanding why, I just raised my hand as if I expected him to repeat my movement like in a mirror. But he just looked at me with a slight smile and quickly walked past. I froze and just stood there, rooted to the spot for a few seconds. Then, gathering my strength, I turned around, but he was already gone. I could only manage to stammer out, "Stop!" even though I knew I was saying it to an empty street. My heart was pounding in my throat. I quickly went up to my floor and opened the door. My cat greeted me. I went through the whole apartment. Naturally, there was no one, and everything was in its place. I rent my place from relatives and live only with my cat. I sat on the bed and carefully looked at the cat. Bad thoughts crept into my mind. Then I rushed to the closet and frantically started looking for the very clothes my copy was wearing, but the clothes were in their place. That evening, I sat for a long time thinking about what I had seen. A lot of time has passed since then, and I have not met my copy again. I have searched for a lot of information about doppelgangers, but I haven't really found anything, although I really want to understand what it was.
My acquaintance Alexei once told me a rather strange story. He was working abroad at a large company, and they rented an entire floor in an office building. One evening, he stayed late at work to finish a project. When he was about to leave, he went to the elevator, but instead of the usual corridor, he ended up in a corridor he had never seen before. The corridor was long, narrow, and very dark. There were doors on both sides, but they were all closed. Out of curiosity, he walked a couple of steps down this corridor, and when he decided to turn back, to his surprise, he found that there was no office behind him, but just the same corridor. Alexei decided to go back anyway, even though he didn't see anything familiar. He walked for several minutes, but the corridor just didn't end. According to him, he had never seen such a long corridor before, and logically, the building wasn't that big. Alexei should have hit a wall or seen the end of the corridor. He realized he was lost and decided to go back in the opposite direction again. But as he said himself, there was no beginning to the corridor in sight. It was as if it was endless. At some point, he started to hear footsteps. My friend said he tried to enter one of the doors, but they were all closed. He walked faster, but the footsteps also sped up. He panicked greatly and started running. As my acquaintance said, he was terrified and ran forward until he ran into a door right in front of him that he hadn't seen before. He opened it and found himself back in his office, as if he had just come out of the very doors that led to the regular corridor. The footsteps were getting closer, so he quickly closed the door and then swiftly left the building. It's worth noting that he is a quite reasonable person and had never told such strange stories before, nor is he prone to making things up. I wonder what that place was.
I want to tell you about a very strange story that happened to me. Back then, I was still living with my parents. My father was working the night shift, my mother had already gone to bed, and I was sitting and watching TV. At some point, there was a knock on the door, Not the doorbell, but specifically a knock. This was strange. I went up, looked through the peephole, and saw my father. This was unexpected, as he was supposed to be at work, but I couldn't not open the door for my own father. I was already reaching out to open the door when suddenly my mother grabbed my hand and said,
"You can't open it to strangers."
I was surprised, but that's my dad. To which my mother, without even looking through the peephole, calmly replied,
"There's no one there."
and she went back to her room. I looked through the peephole again, and indeed, there was no one there anymore. My heart gave an unpleasant jolt. I went into my mother's room to ask what that was, because I had definitely seen my father. And there, another surprise awaited me. My mother was asleep. But just a second ago, it was she who didn't let me open the door. I asked, "Mom, what was that?" She half opened her eyes with a look of complete bewilderment on her face. I realized she didn't remember anything. I woke her up completely and told her what had happened. She was just as surprised as I was. The next day, I also told this story to my father. He was stunned, and from that moment on, we agreed that if one of us came home, they had to ring the doorbell 3 short times. Many years have passed, but I still don't know what it was. Who was knocking on the door, and who stopped me from opening it?
I once saw something that made me doubt my own sanity. It was a normal winter evening. I met my girlfriend after work, and we were heading home. We were walking and talking about different things, and in front of us, some guy in a coat was walking. We were following him at a distance of about 10 meters, and at some point, he just disappeared. From what I saw, I even stopped. I asked my girlfriend, "Do you see that?" She answered, "Yes." We stood there for a bit, looking at each other. We walked another couple of meters and were still looking around. My gaze falls on a shop window, in which I see the reflection of that very guy. His black silhouette and hat are visible, although in reality, he is not there. And literally a second later, his reflection also disappears, and the window now normally reflects me and my girlfriend standing on the sidewalk. I got goosebumps. I grabbed my girlfriend and quickly pulled her from there. Neither she nor I know what happened. If I had been alone, I might have thought I imagined it, but my girlfriend saw it too. It was one of the strangest moments in my life. I was once riding on a night train. It was well past midnight, and most of the passengers were asleep, but I couldn't fall asleep. I always find it difficult to sleep away from home. In the end, I decided to go out to the vestibule for a smoke. And so, walking down the corridor, I saw a man with completely black eyes coming out of the vestibule. Not just black pupils, but his entire eye was black. I didn't show my reaction. I just walked past him into the vestibule. He, meanwhile, went to his compartment, which was right next to mine. I stood there, smoking, but all the while I kept glancing at that compartment. After finishing my cigarette, I went back and, as if by chance, peeked into the half-open door. Inside, there were 2 others, seemingly guys in their 30s, but it was hard to make them out in the dim light, and the one with the black eyes just sat and stared straight ahead. He wasn't moving, and in the moonlight, it seemed to me that his skin was unnaturally pale. A cold sweat broke out on me. Having returned to my compartment, I began to listen, but nothing came from the neighboring one. I didn't sleep all night, only dozing off a little in the morning. When I woke up, I decided to go out for another smoke. For some reason, I wanted to see him again. But that compartment was closed, and only when the train stopped at one of the stations did I see him silently get out. Only then did that strange, oppressive feeling inside me. To this day, I don't know who he was, but I am sure he was not an ordinary person.
I suppose if someone had told me this story, I would have never believed it. But I had to personally encounter something very strange. It so happened that my husband and I work remotely and had long dreamed of living in our own house, away from the city hustle. Finally, having saved up the necessary amount, we were able to afford to buy a small 2-story house not far from the city. The place was just wonderful. Nature all around, no noise, no neighbors above. There was a lot of space in the yard, where I was already planting flowers. At first, everything was great. We did a little cosmetic renovation on the first floor. The second floor was more like an attic. There, we found a lot of old things left by the previous owner and threw them away. I was incredibly happy until one night when everything changed. I woke up because I heard footsteps on the second floor. I woke my husband up, we went to check, but there was no one. We went back to bed, and just as I was almost falling asleep, I heard footsteps again right above us. I got up abruptly, and at that very moment, I felt as if someone was running across the second floor. For a couple of days, it was quiet, but one evening, while we were watching TV, I heard a thud, as if someone was hitting the floor of the second floor. I called my husband, we went up together, and we were just in shock. Things that had been lying in the corners before were scattered all over the floor. My husband searched every corner, but we didn't find anyone. We went downstairs in silence. And this is the strangest part. Literally a couple of minutes later, a dull sound came from upstairs, as if something heavy had fallen to the floor. My husband rushed back upstairs again, and again, no one was there. And in the morning, my husband admitted that the night before, while I was sleeping, he had heard someone coming down the stairs, but he didn't see anyone and decided not to wake me. In the end, we decided to invite a priest. He blessed the house, read prayers, and after that, everything really calmed down. I don't know who or what it was, but I am very glad that it all stopped. My son Seryoja, who was about 4 years old at the time, had never seen my mother, his grandmother. She died long before he was born, and we never showed him her photographs so as not to burden the child with such things. I don't think we even told him about her. One day, I decided to go to the cemetery to tidy up my mom's grave, and I took my son with me, as there was no one to leave him with. We were walking down the alley, and from a distance, I could already see the familiar monument. Seryoja was walking next to me, holding my hand. When we were about 10 meters away from the grave, he suddenly stopped abruptly, pulled my hand, pointing his little finger directly at the grave, and said, "Mom, look. Grandma is standing there and looking at us." I was stunned because there was no one there, just the monument and the bushes around it. I looked closely, but I still didn't see anyone. I then asked him, "Which grandma? There's no one there." And he turned to me and began to describe her. "What do you mean? There she is, standing in a headscarf. She's smiling and looking at you." I got goosebumps. He described my mother as if he knew her. She always wore a headscarf. We buried her in it. But he had never seen her before. And he couldn't have seen the photo on the grave either. According to my son, she then disappeared. I wasn't scared. I tidied up the grave, and now I know for sure that they see us. And maybe they come to show that everything is okay.
When I was 25, I was moonlighting as a guard at an enterprise. My job was to guard a warehouse and make a round of the perimeter outside every couple of hours. One night, I was sitting at my post when I heard a strange sound, similar to a scratching. I went to check and saw some kind of thing that made the hair on my head stand on end. There was a creature standing there. Its figure was like a human's, but something was wrong with its face. I couldn't get a good look, but I definitely saw that the skin was white with some kind of growths. It was clearly taller than me, and I myself am not short, 1.90 meters. And it was impossibly thin, and there was no hair on its head, just smooth white skin. I saw this well, because its head was tilted, and it was looking from under its brow. The most terrifying thing was its eyes. They were a bright yellow color and looked directly at me. It even seemed to me that they were glowing. The creature began to move slowly towards me. I quickly ran back to my place and pressed the alarm button. When the squad and I began to inspect the warehouse, we found nothing. I said that there was a big person there because I didn't want to be taken for a crazy person. I haven't seen that thing again. I'll tell you about an incident that still haunts me. It was a few years ago. My friend and I were returning home late at night. It was well past midnight, 0 people on the street. The silence was unusual.
only our footsteps could be heard. And so we were walking, chatting, and suddenly we heard someone calling us by our names. And the voice was quiet, but very clear, as if someone was whispering directly into my ear. We immediately stopped, looked at each other, and started looking around. No one. We decided we imagined it and walked on. We walked about 10 meters and heard the same voice again. Only now it was louder and as if from behind. We turned around sharply, but again there was no one. That's when it started to feel a bit creepy. We quickened our pace, and this voice began to call us more and more often and was already almost screaming. It felt like it was literally walking behind us, 2 meters away. We started to run, but the voice also got louder. It was already outright yelling, and it was really scary. You could hear the scream, but you couldn't see the source. We ran home. My friend frantically took out his keys, and this voice was still nearby, as if it was about to enter with us. We flew inside, slammed the door, and locked it. We hid and started listening. The voice behind the door was still screaming something for about 10 seconds, and then it began to fade and finally disappeared. We couldn't sleep until morning then. And the most terrifying part is that it called us by our names. Who or what it could have been on an empty street in the dead of night, we never found out. Each of these stories makes you wonder, maybe there are other realities or creatures next to us that we simply don't see. And have you had similar cases? Share your stories in the comments, and thanks for watching.